The following program was brought to you by CDEC, the California Inland Empire District Export Council, working with local, state, and federal organizations to provide resources and educational opportunities to help facilitate trade. And by the U.S. Commercial Service, a division of the U.S. Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration, whose mission is to increase U.S. exports, enhance job creation, strengthen national security, promote and protect U.S. commercial interests abroad, and deliver customized solutions to ensure that U.S. businesses compete and win in the global marketplace.
Let me just highlight. Chief, I could probably spend about 2 hours reading your resume here, but I'm just going to highlight. The one thing that really stuck out to me, and I'm sure some of you have recognized that, Chief LaForme served in the U.S. Army for 6 years from 1962 and 1968. Thank you for your service. 3 of those years were spent overseas, and he received an honorable discharge in June of 1966 and returned home to the Mississaugas. But as I highlight some of the things that I felt that was important, one of the things that was most meaningful was Chief LaForme had the honor of signing the final settlement of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation Brand Tract, and Toronto purchased specific claims in 2010. The financial settlement received from these claims have provided funding for health, education, and allowed the building of a new community center in 2013. With that, ladies and gentlemen, Chief Brian LaForme.
I just want to thank Fred for the opportunity to come here this afternoon and just talk a little bit about who we are and what we're about, and some of the things that we'll be sharing with you are around economic development and how we want to move forward and build a foundation. I've already did my official welcome. I passed over tobacco to Fred this morning. That's part of our culture. When we go into somebody else's land or territory, we hand over tobacco. And so I've done my responsibility as a visiting guest here to this, what I would call territory here, and I wanted to thank Fred for that opportunity. And it's a pleasure for myself and my colleague Larry, who sits on council with me, to be here this morning to talk to you. We're a small community in southern Ontario. We're small but mighty, I would say. We've done a lot of things. We're part of a larger nation. We're part of the Ojibwe Nation that would take in all of Ontario, portions of the United States, would be Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio, areas of that nature. And if you look on the map, you'll see that there's a green area, it's not up there, but will encompass our traditional lands that we occupy right now, that area right there. And you can see a large part of that area takes in one of the most important cities in Canada, which is Toronto. Toronto is the hub of the finance district and everything else that takes place. And as Fred said, we have a special honor, and we've made history with this, because in 2014, we signed a protocol agreement with the Pan Am Committee that recognizes us as the host First Nation of the land. And what that means is that we've invited 41 countries to participate in our traditional lands in Toronto. And that's very significant for us, because it means that we now have an opportunity to visit with these other countries build foundations, build up relationships with the other countries, and hopefully long-lasting partnerships. The other area that is very significant for us is that it allows us to be involved in those games in other ways. And by that I mean it's the medal ceremonies that we'll be involved in. We'll be involved in the opening ceremonies of the Pan Am Games. We'll be involved in the closing ceremonies of those games. Special opportunity for me as the leader of my community, and it's an honor for me to do that and be the leader, is that they've asked me to go to Mexico City. As Fred said, I leave Sunday, so I'll leave here and just hop on another plane and go to Mexico City, light the flame for the Pan Am Games, and bring it back to Toronto for the opening ceremonies in July. So that's a special honor for my nation to be able to participate in those types of events. So with that, that opens the door to broader opportunities for us as a nation, as a small nation, a part of the Ojibwe Nation, to open our doors and look at other opportunities for our little community, not only with the other 41 countries, but with the United States as well, and with the tribes here in the United States. Because we want to build relationships, and we have, with some of the tribes here in the United States, and hopefully to continue on those relationship buildings. We want to build a foundation, because in our culture, and Larry will speak to this a little bit, is that we have to look forward to 7 generations. We have to take care and be responsible for the next 7 generations. That's our responsibility as leaders of our community. So we take that very seriously. So we build that foundation with events like this, and to carry that message to youth that are from other countries that can share with us that same philosophy. I'm going to ask Larry if he wants to talk about, because we're involved in a lot of employment opportunities, and we're looking for sustainable economic development in our community that will bring meaningful job opportunities to our community. And that's significant to us because, again, that capitalizes on the 7 generations that we speak. And with that, I'm going to let Larry chat a little bit about some of the things that we're involved in.
Thank you, Chief. It's certainly my pleasure to be here. Thank you to Fred for inviting us as one First Nation out of 633 in the country of Canada. In the United States, there is also 555 tribes here from coast to coast that we have are looking to have business relations with. So it's a pleasure for me to be here and speak on behalf of our community at this international gathering. And Fred had mentioned the fact that 1999 was a significant year for his department, signing an agreement with the San Manuel Indian Band here in Southern California. At the same time, in 1999, in July of 1999, the National Congress of American Indians and the Assembly of First Nations in Canada, that's North American tribes throughout all of North America, met and signed a historic agreement on an economic and kinship agreement. And that was significant for us, and I'm not sure what other tribal nations have done here in the U.S. or First Nations in Canada with respect to that particular agreement, but we see this as a major advancement for us to be able to enforce that agreement and look towards doing business with tribes here in America as well as other business opportunities. I wanted to mention the fact of Brian's discussion about 7 generations. I'm a former chief of our community. I'm also a former Grand Chief in the province of Ontario, ran for national chief in the country. So I'm very familiar with the economics and politics of our own tribal nations. I've had the distinct pleasure of living and working here in California for the last 10 years. I moved home 2 years ago, so I'm very familiar with Southern California and the gaming industry nationally in America. And we have a responsibility to move, as Brian said, think when we make our decisions to think of how that affects the next 7 generations into the future. Our elders have continually driven that point home for us to understand that. And as we move away from poverty management, is basically what we've been doing for the last 100, 200 years in Canada, managing poverty in our own communities. We absolutely want to move away from that to wealth creation. We have the means, we have the financial capacity now to put us on the map in the country, and we've been pursuing that through international partnerships and domestic partnerships in Canada. Someone mentioned earlier about Supreme Court decisions or some decisions that have been made at the federal level. In Canada right now, Supreme Court decisions have basically put us on the map to enhance business development between corporations and First Nations. And if it was not for those if it was not for those court decisions at the Supreme Court level, we would not be where we are now. And that is businesses that want to do business in our traditional homelands, in the city of Toronto, have to come to us and talk to us about business development and give us first opportunity to do business relations. That's a major issue for us. Toronto is the heartbeat of commerce in Canada, and Ontario being that heartbeat as well. I'm not sure if anyone knows, but our premier, the Premier of Ontario, was just meeting with the Obama administration, looking at business opportunities in both countries. 4 documents that put us on the map today. Number 1 is the Jay Treaty. The Jay Treaty was signed between the United States and Great Britain. And First Nations in Canada, we know this very well, as we call ourselves North American Indians. We have dual citizenship to live and work and commerce, trade in the United States and Canada. The American Indian has the same through that Jay Treaty to be able to carry on commerce and business development. We have not been signatory necessarily to NAFTA, but we want to take advantage of NAFTA. The tribal nations in First Nations in Canada have not necessarily been involved under NAFTA, but now is the time for us, we see as an opportunity. The agreement that I talked earlier about NCAI and AFN certainly is a vehicle for us to do business. The other international document, I suppose, is the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Rights. Through that United Nations Declaration, you will know, if you followed anything like that, United States and Canada were the last 2 signatories to that. Every other country around the world were upfront about supporting the United Nations Declaration. In the United Nations Declaration, they talk a lot about economic opportunity for us. And we see that as a vehicle to move, again, beyond poverty management to wealth creation. Right now in Canada, there is a lot, and particularly with our First Nation in Toronto, natural resource development is huge. It's some areas are in its infant stages. We have diamond mines. Who would have known 500 years ago when they relocated us out of Toronto that our communities would be sitting on the wealthiest veins of chromite in the world? They thought they put us in the swamp somewhere, and we're sitting on the wealthiest veins in the world now, here in 2015. And now the Supreme Court decisions have said, you got to talk to the Indians, boys. No longer. We're no longer dealing with crumbs here. We want serious opportunities for our peoples, and that is to sustain ourselves for the next 7 generations. We have diamond mines, we have gold mines, we have the chromite is one of the largest in the world, that is our neighbors in the north. We have iron ore, that is serious. China wants in the iron ore industry in our communities. On renewable energies, there's renewable energy projects, international corporations that understand and want to do business with the First Nations. We, a couple of years back in 2010, just between our community and 6 Nations of the Grand River, we done an economic leakage study. And out of just the 2 communities, there's $1 billion worth of monies leaking out of our territories. $1 billion a year annually, just in 2 communities, not talking about the other 631. When we talk remote communities, our neighbors in the north, We have opportunities to partner with them and partner with businesses, whether it's in hydroelectricity, generating facilities, renewable energies, and solar and wind farm. All of those types of opportunities are there. We are virgin in our First Nations in business development, and we are absolutely open for business and want to do business with our American counterparts as well as internationally. Jim Miigwech, thank you.
Yeah, one of the things that is most important and must be emphasized when we talk about economic development and how we move forward with economic development. The proponents out there like Union Gas and TransCanada and Enbridge, that when they're working in our traditional territory, when they're coming in to put oil lines in and pipelines in, they have to talk to us when they're coming through our traditional lands. They have to come to us. No longer can they come into our territories and start developing. The Supreme Court has ruled that they have to do a consultation and accommodation before they can put a shovel in the ground. They have to talk to us. So we have an advantage now, and as Larry said, we're new to this. But our history tells us that if we move forward and we look at the 7 generations, we'll be successful in what we do. And that's been proven with our history throughout the years, because since time and millennium, we're still here. Despite what government have done, we're still here. Our doors are open. We're ready to do business. And I can't wait until July 10th, when we receive with open arms and open hearts the 41 other countries that are coming into our traditional lands. It's a great honor for us to be able to do that.
So if I may piggyback on what the chief has just said on the PEGs, we have two simultaneous
Yes.
groups moving forward. The chief is responsible for the Pan American Games Secretariat that is organizing all of the events within the city that has to do with First Nations and us in particular. But my role, along with Kevin Wazagijic, who's here in the group with us, my role is economic development opportunity. Kevin is back there by the lights. Kevin Wazagijic is our economic development director of operations there. And my role on the other one is to welcome the world to Toronto. We have some brochures outside in the hallway. You're certainly welcome to take advantage of that and take them home with you. But we're looking at, Kevin and I are looking at business opportunities from those 41 nations that come to Toronto as a legacy. We want to do something that's beyond September of 2015, creating business opportunities from those 41 nations economically, and be able to certainly mark that into the future. Before I forget, the Mississaugas of New Credit is hosting Aboriginal Business Match East Conference in Toronto on November 4th, 3rd and 4th in Toronto this year. That is all of Aboriginal businesses in Canada. We'll be looking at business matches and opportunities there, and we're introducing business partners that work with First Nation partners there in Canada. So if you're interested in that, please see Kevin, and he'll inform you anything about that. Jim Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'd like to start our question and answer session now, and we can go until noon. So questions, please. Hands up so we can get a microphone. Back over there. Do we have that young man with the microphone?
I think I stole his microphone,
somebody-
Mr. Chairman.
You stole his mic?
I will give it to him. Thank you.
There's the runner.
In the Indian reservations, there's a big problem with diabetes and obesity. And how are you going to help companies like my company, which is a medical device company, which helps people with diabetes and with obesity and other kinds of issues? How are you going to help to entice those companies into your your tribes up in Northern America?
Well, we have special status as First Nations or tribes in Canada that, and I'm sure it's the same here with tribes here, that we're tax exempt. And so if we're going to attract companies into our territory, we offer that as an incentive for them to come and do business with us. And you're right, sugar diabetes is one of the illnesses that afflict First Nations people or Aboriginal people of this lands at a high level. And so it would be an opportunity for us to open those doors and discuss those opportunities.
Can I speak?
Yeah, of course.
Let me speak to that as well. One of the things that most people don't know about Canada is the majority of our First Nations are remote. And I'm not talking driving in some remote northern community. I'm saying that the only way to get into those communities is fly in or winter road when the ice freezes or by boat in the summertime. So the health and social issues that concern our communities is seriously behind the 8 ball, shall I say. And for us, we're responsible for the broader social issues that pertain to our communities, like health and mental health and all of the pharmaceutical side, being able to look at opportunities like that. So when you talk with the question about how we relate with our remote factor, all of the things you're talking about, mobile medical, maybe what we need. Right now, remote communities have to fly their patients out if they got heart attacks or anything like that. It's the small community can't mandate that. So they have to have some idea of going into the future of being able to deal with that on the spot.
So if a company had mobile technology in the medical field that could go out to these remote areas, that would be of great interest to you.
You're the man we want to talk to.
Okay.
For sure.
Next question, right there.
Thank you. It's a great privilege to have you speaking before us. You've given me a lot of ideas. I'm the president of the World Space Foundation, and we have some gifts we'd like to present to you. I spent a number of years from 1994 to 2009 working for NASA, and much of our outreach was to the First Nation communities here in this country. So these are some special NASA pins, and I had the opportunity to speak with Brian beforehand, and the pin that's being presented to the current president has an astronaut named Julie Payette, who is from Canada. So that was the mission that had a Canadian astronaut. And the other pin is of the International Space Station. So among the things that we have done and we continue to do is bring science education and bring participation of students from all areas, urban areas, Native American areas. And the students that we have with us, I think it would be a terrific idea to send some of these students as ambassadors to the Pan Am Games. Don't you think that would be a great idea?
I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the young people to interact with other countries that are going to be there. I think it's an educational opportunity as well as a learning experience. Education for our First Nation or our tribe is a priority, and we funnel a lot of dollars into our school. We teach our language and our culture in our school, starting in our daycare on up. And so it's always a challenge on how you revitalize your culture. But we're trying it, and we're trying to do the best we can at it. So yeah, there's opportunity there for them to come and visit and be a part of the Pan Am.
I think you reminded me, sir, of telecommunications is a major issue when you talk about NASA. In the remote communities of Canada, they are not connected. Usually they have a satellite phone that basically is not good for communication. There's serious gaps in our processes in telecommunication. We are trying to deal with or working with satellite companies to try and offset the need in the communities of the north to try and fill that gap. And even though Canada has a thing called Canada Connect, it's still serious problems for the First Nations in the more northerly communities. So we in the south, as a southern community, have expertise. They have resource in the north with no expertise. We're trying to sort of marry those two on more of a provincial-wide level.
I'm sorry.
One last question, please. Quick. We have time for one last question.
Lori Van Arsdale from Hemet, and I want to tell you it's especially a privilege to have you here. As a child who grew up part of my childhood on the Navajo reservation, I'm especially sensitive to many, many needs and many, many issues. If you are there and sending us diamonds, what are the best thing we can send you? What are your needs that we might meet from here that are most prominent? And the other question I have are, is there a lot of infrastructure needs? It sounds like with the remote tribes that there would be, but what are some of the primary top things that we can provide for you?
As you know, and you've probably had the experience of being living with Navajos, and that is that infrastructure is always a big issue for First Nations. Larry touched on it when he talked about the remote First Nations, remote communities up there, the fly-in communities that have very little, if any, infrastructure. So infrastructure, water lines, potable water to drink, nice streets, good housing, all those are very important. In the South, we still have communities, even though they're very, very prosperous and have all the natural resources that they need to compete with the outside world, still have to have infrastructure. There's communities, our community is only 75% done with infrastructure when it comes to good potable water. So there's certainly a need out there for that kind of thing. As far as the diamonds and what they need up there, I think the biggest thing would be advanced technology for those resources. And Larry may want to talk to that, but that's what I would see would be the need up there, is the new technology on how you move forward with that.
Yeah, one of the experiences that I found living in the United States, and I've worked and traveled the United States since the 1970s as a iron worker, a structural steel iron worker, building like the Empire State Buildings and things like that. So I've traveled the United States for several years, but it was a different thing when I lived in the United States. I noticed in the United States they never talk about Canada. Yet Canada has all American stations, everything about America, Canada. But this country, particularly here in Southern California, I couldn't even get our hockey games here in Southern California, and come here rooting for my own teams. I didn't see them on TV. So I know that you do not get a lot of Canadian broadcasting in the content of First Nations and the tribal nations. But one of the biggest challenges in the north, and again, I'll call us, for lack of a better word, we're in our infant stages of development all the way around. And one of the biggest challenges is the northern prices of food. Food is seriously, seriously high for the northern Eskimo, Inuit we call them, and the northern remote communities.
Unfortunately, as has been the case all morning, this is not enough time, and there are many more questions, and unfortunately, we need to move on to the next aspect of today's program. So please, I'm inviting the guests to stay and make themselves available for questions and answers.
Yeah, just one final thing, and I just want to emphasize, it's been a real pleasure for myself and my colleague Larry to be here and share with you what's happening in our territories and what we would like to see happen with the other countries and the visitors here today. So I again want to thank Fred and the organization for asking us to come and participate in this 21st conference. It's been a real pleasure for me, and I just want to say chi miigwech for the opportunity.
It's been a real pleasure to have you, genuinely.